and help grow our members. So thank you for this opportunity. As Gage said, I'm a partner at Stoll Reeves, which is kind of like a mid-sized regional law firm. We've got about 450 attorneys nationwide, and I've kind of grown in my practice here from being a summer associate up through partner. I'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves a little bit. So if they could just, say their name, what their current position is, and what their role is in their affiliate. If we could start with Victoria Stairs.
Hi. So I'm Victoria Stairs. I work at Sound Physicians, which is a national physician medical group. We're across the country, so from the East Coast to Hawaii. And I am Associate General Counsel with the organization, and I also serve as a director on the board of directors for Flow.
Great. Mark?
Hi, I'm Mark Franco. I am an associate in the nonprofit practice of Whiteford, Taylor, and Preston. We're generally a regional East Coast firm that does lots of different corporate types of matters, and I am the Virginia representative on the board of FALA DC.
Great. Jill?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jill Yu. So my position title is Special Assistant. I work for the federal government, specifically with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. What does Special Assistant mean? I like to joke that in my position description, there's a bullet that says other duties as assigned. I feel like that's my position sometimes. But actually, like in comparison to everyone on this panel, I'm not a practicing attorney, although I do use a lot of my legal experience in what I do. I support a senior executive service member here in the federal government, or commonly known as an SES. That person is equivalent to like a C-suite type of position. We essentially handle all secretarial initiatives here. One of them I'm in charge of in implementing. So I do a lot of the operations, also handle a lot of just some day-to-day things to support my executive in managing 65 offices throughout the nation.
Great. So this is also a good spot for the disclaimer. The views expressed during this presentation are those of each individual speaker only, and not necessarily their affiliated employers. So we'll get that housekeeping out of the way. Starting off, Mark, can you let us know what your typical day looks like as an associate of at a law firm?
Sure. So in this particular practice, we serve as outside general counsel to corporate organizations that are nonprofit and tax exempt. What does that mean? Well, on any given day, we're usually the first line of defense in terms of if they have outside, if they're looking for outside legal advice regarding any kind of matter that could come up with their organization. So it could be an employment issue, it could be an intellectual property issue, it could be a contract issue, it could be a governance issue. I mean, it really is a really wide sort of practice, and it's good for someone who's likes to do lots of different things. Now, the one thing that you don't do a lot of is really delve into really complex matters. You know, those are normally handed off to the experts that we'll have within the firm. So, you know, a trademarks person, you'll have a litigation person, you have a products defense person, you'll have a regulatory person, but your job is sort of to be able to understand the matter at hand and then figure out how the organization is going to need to address it from a legal perspective. So a lot of what I'm doing is that on a regular basis all the time.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds to me like you've got just a huge amount of material substantively that you're responsible for. How do you stay on top of legal trends and things in that area?
Yeah,
It's so
so
wide.
yeah. Well, in this particular industry, in the nonprofit industry, there's actually a very strong there's a very strong legal community. So there's always programming going on. We're here in DC, and DC is the association capital of the world. And so there's always some kind of event going on where you can learn about what's happening in terms of the law, in terms of the law, and in terms of just the regular industry. So there's lots of opportunities. Also, if you're part of a firm, the firm actually provides access to the learning platform for free. So you can find programming from 1 hour to up to an all-day seminar if you have the time for it. And I'll put on some of that stuff sometimes in the background while I'm working. So there's lots of opportunities to make sure that you're up on the current trends.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm kind of hearing from you there is that it's not just about doing the work in front of you, that you have to really think about broadening your skill set, using some initiative on your own, and also getting out of the office a little bit and building your network. Is that fair to say?
Sure. I think that, particularly in a firm practice where, you're expected not just to help the other individuals, the other attorneys that are in the firm, but there's going to be expectation that you have to develop your own work and business to some degree. It's really important for you to go out not just to learn about the law, but also to learn about what the clients are like in the industry, to learn about how organizations like to interact with each other and with legal personnel. I mean, there's lots of learning that goes on in many phases of the practice, and I think that could be one thing that's maybe unique to working in a firm practice.
Okay. Well, I don't know if that's unique to working in the firm practice. I think that skill set is fungible in government. I think it's fungible
Sure.
probably in-house, but I'm just speaking as somebody who spent my entire legal career in a law firm. Jill and Victoria have circulated some tip sheets that's included in the materials for this presentation. And some of these tips that are included in those tip sheets speak directly to these points. So I'm going to ask Jill, your first tip is to build an individual development plan, which I think flows into a lot of the things that Mark and I were just talking about.
Mhm.
Can you kind of walk us through what an individual development plan is?
Yeah, definitely. So in the federal government, it's called, we, we like abbreviations. So government speak is IDPs. So the IDP is essentially a roadmap of where you as an individual would like to see your career. The IDP, the individual development plan, can list your professional goals, your skills that you hope to enhance or improve upon, or just any learning and training opportunities that you wish to pursue to inform and enhance your skill set, as well as build your career trajectory. In the federal government, there's an office called Office of Personnel Management, OPM. They are the ones who are essentially our federal HR office, and they provide some helpful templates and tips on how to develop your IDP. But I strongly encourage anyone, no matter what part of your career, no matter where you are in your career, whether you're new to the government or new to a position as an attorney, or 5 years, 10 years into your career, to develop an IDP. It's just helpful to know this is where you're at, planning for your future, where you end up, where you want to end up, and finding tips and ways to um, build your career so you end up in that position that you are hoping to aspire to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that my firm is not unique in that we ask our associates through partners to develop a practice plan that kind of models after that IDP concept that you talked about. Personally, I like to have short-term, mid-term and long-term goals, and I will reevaluate those periodically to make sure that I'm that those goals are still current goals for me, and B, that I'm making progress towards those goals. When you develop your IDP, Jill, is this something that you would, write it once and then put it away in a filing cabinet, or how do you use it as a working tool to accomplish your goals?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question. My current IDP, actually, how I got to my position has a lot to do with my IDP. So when I first started in the federal government, that was about 5 years ago, I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know the government can be so vast and there's so many opportunities. I used it more as a conversation starter with my immediate supervisor. So my supervisor and I addressed some goals that I hope to aspire to achieve. And then I started formulating my IDP. Then every mid-year evaluation, every end of the year evaluation, I would bring that IDP with me to have to pick up where we left off in that conversation with my supervisor. So in those conversations, sometimes my goals have changed. I learned some new skills. I met new colleagues, and I want to change my career goals. And so I would constantly revise and adjust the IDP based on my new goals. And as I mentioned, this is how I actually got my position here, because I was very explicit after a year or 2 years into the government. I realized I want to be a senior executive. I want to be in a C-suite. A lot of it is personally, I'm just ambitious, but also there's just not a lot of representation of people that look like us in the government. So I find it incredibly important for me to try to shoot for that. Fast forward, I meet my current boss, who is a senior executive. And after communicating with him what my goals were, he took a look at my IDP and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a special assistant. Would you mind coming on board with me?" And that's kind of how I use my IDP to move on to the next level. So.
Great. Victoria, you've also pivoted your career from being outside law firm practice to now having an in-house role. Did you kind of develop a individual plan yourself as you made that transition, or how did that come about?
So I started practice doing medical malpractice. I was a litigator for about 15 years. When I started out, my first goal was I wanted to be a partner. I think when you start out in private practice, I think that's the goal, right? It's one day become a partner at a law firm. And then, as I started practicing, I started to think, is that really what I wanted to do? There's a lot of business development involved, and I was doing all the things I needed to do to, as part of the partner track. And I realized that, there's a lot of hustling that happens. I'm sure you can, you'd probably agree, John, where you have to really get people to buy into you. And I was really good at making relationships, building those relationships. But I also kind of didn't like the idea that, you have to create this book of business and then maintain it and also your level of partnership. It's not just making partner. You become like a senior partner if you have like, a certain number of millions of dollars of revenue. And, it really wasn't something that I thought I wanted. And then I thought about working in the government agency, like in the government. And for me, I wanted to become a judge. And one of the things I did was like I looked at an application to be a judge, and I started ticking off boxes. What do I want to do? And I actually turned in my application about a year before I moved to Washington, and it didn't go very far just because the governor was changing. So because I was very good at building relationships with clients, there was always sometimes that offer of like, hey, would you like to come work in-house for us? You know our business, you know how we function. And while I did not like transition to a job to one of my clients because we decided to move from California to Washington, a lot of that experience I carried with me of knowing how to treat my clients so that they looked good to their superiors. And so now being in the shoes of the actual client where everyone kind of reports to me as far as our cases are concerned, I appreciate like kind of what our attorneys are doing. And, when we hire, and I just hired a paralegal, I look to people who come from that background because they know our company, and it's easier for them to understand like what's important to the organization and how we function. So to the extent that I tried a whole bunch of different things, and this is the one that stuck. But it really is just about like building the relationships and the experience that you think you're going to need for that particular in-house position.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just piggyback on something that Victoria said?
Yeah.
I think she said it way better than I did. I mean, there's going to be in a firm practice, there's going to be a certain component of your growth plan that has to address the need to grow a book of business or to develop clients. And I think that's what's sort of unique working in this particular type of role. So, you're right that there's a growth plan for everybody, but part of understanding in firm how you're going to need to grow is also understanding your capabilities to be able to do business development or build a book of business.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, how do you get that feedback as to what your capabilities are in that area?
Well,
is that
hopefully
something where you're working with mentors or?
Yeah. Hopefully you have really good partners that you're working with that give that to you. I mean, I think it's really important. One of the tips that I provided that's on the sheet is that you have to have key relationships, sort of up and down different levels of colleagues that you're going to work with. So you have to have good relationships with your peers. You have to have good relationships with partners, and I think they're going to be the ones that are really important in helping you understand if you're doing things in a way that makes sense or if you need to improve in certain areas.
Mm-hmm. And Victoria, on the tip sheet that you had sent, you had identified the importance to develop channels of communications, and I think that's kind of the same thing that Mark's talking about here. When you're referencing developing channels of communication, is that solely internal or external or just in the law department? How do you view that?
So our legal department is really small. There's we have about 6,000 employees, and there's just 5 attorneys that are in our department. And so I oversee quite a few kind of things. All of our claims and litigation, from business, professional liability, employment, to risk identification, risk mitigation from a clinical standpoint, when our physicians are out on the field at hospitals, and then our compliance and regulatory matters. And so important for us when I say channels of communication, because we're nationally based and we have our clinicians are in hospitals. So while we have probably 3 locations, our doctors aren't necessarily, or our employees aren't necessarily on site anywhere. So they don't know where to turn when something bad happens, when there's a risk issue, if they get served with a subpoena, if they're, whatever it is that they're trying to deal with. So kind of you're almost advertising yourself to the company and say, hey, I'm here, come, reach out to me, and trying to also create this idea of I should be your first contact. Whenever you have a problem, reach out to me, because if you try and handle this on your own, you may you may create more trouble for yourself. And so trying to funnel that type of communication of like identifying yourself, giving them avenues to talk to you, like, our cell phones, our desk phone, our email address. And I even created a website that doesn't have my name on it. It's just litigation@soundphysicians.com. That way, like if something comes up, it comes to an email. They might not remember my name, but they'll at least be able to get me an email. So I have that communication, because a lot of times for us, it's how soon or how early can we be involved, that will really change the difference, or make a difference later on in the case.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is that you're not just trying to be reactive. You're trying to get out in front of issues and be able to thought partner with your client teams, your business units earlier, right?
Right.
Okay, and to do that, I think you probably had to develop some political savviness, which Jill, you hit on that as one of your points in your tip sheet. Can you talk about what you mean by political savviness?
Yeah, so I think for me, coming from the federal government, and appreciate you the disclaimer, I'm not representing my department or the agency. I work with a lot of political appointees, so I'm considered a career federal servant, meaning I don't have an expiration to my appointment. I'm here permanently. But the appointees that we do have, there's a rotation, of course, of every time there's a new administration, they leave, new crop comes in, etc. So there's a level of understanding like what the power structures are in the office, understanding the culture that is set up. The political savviness ties in with some emotional intelligence, really. It's important to be self-aware how others view you, how you present to others, but also there's a level of knowing the hierarchies. That's really what I think political savviness means to me. If you understand the power dynamics in the office, you understand the hierarchies, you also will have a better chance to know how to advance yourself, how to build allies and networks, but also avoiding potential pitfalls. You don't want to walk into or create a conflict unintentionally, but if you have that political savviness, that awareness about you, you'll probably make a lot more friends and probably be able to grow in your career path with and developing new networks.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I see with younger attorneys, and we've all done this, is we've created, or maybe we've walked into a pitfall, or we've had an experience with our colleagues that wasn't 100% positive. I think part of what people need to be able to do is kind of have some grit and work through that, to know that it's not dispositive on their career. Like most everybody makes some mistakes. When you see, maybe in your career or others, when there's been somebody who's walked into this pitfall, what advice would you have for them?
Oh, that's a good one. Speaking from experience, I've accidentally walked into a couple of pitfalls. I do think a lot of it has to do with some humility. Understanding that as a new hire, whether you are brand new to the practice area, brand new to the position, the office, etc., there were people who came before you and probably set some certain structures in place. And so it's great that sometimes new hires bring new energy. We want that new energy, but we also need to be able to um, resolve that and balance that with those who've been practicing or those who've been in the office for longer periods of time before you. They might not like the shakeup. They might need some time to adjust to new hires, new staff, etc. So if there is a pitfall that you accidentally come across, I do think a lot of it has to do with just take a moment, take a breath, um, understand where the other person's coming from, understand where you're coming from, check your emotions, check how you're feeling. Are you feeling frustrated? Do you feel that the other person misunderstood what you're saying? And also come at it with, I'm sure everyone's doing this with the best intentions, but there was clearly some miscommunications that need to be resolved. So um, in speaking about the power dynamics before resolving a conflict so quickly, I also would remind folks to maybe take a moment, understand like if this is a superior, somebody of your peer level, there's different ways to resolve conflict based on those power structures also. You don't necessarily just walk into a room. If it's an assistant secretary, you're like, I'm really upset with you. There's some decorum that you need to recognize. But if it's a peer level, perhaps just taking a moment to grab coffee with them, understand why we came and butted heads, just listen and hear where they're coming from.
Mark, I'm going to switch this to you. In the law firm setting, when you're looking for a new hire, a new associate, what kind of skills really would stand out to you? What do you like to see in a cover letter or in a resume, or in that conversation in the first interview?
Sure. I actually, this is my second career. So I practiced in finance and admin for 12 years. So I've looked at hundreds of resumes, and I think there's a lot of people like to put significant amount of emphasis on resumes and cover letters. Just my opinion is that you don't need to work too hard on them. Just make sure though you're ticking off the boxes that you need to. So make sure there aren't any typos. Don't put like irrelevant things in them. I mean, those are the things that I typically look for when I'm just looking to see if there's somebody that I want to, that's worth talking to. Yeah, they have the relevant experience. They seem to, be doing the things that would be applicable in this sort of role. But definitely, if you have like a crazy font, or you're putting sort of weird things in there, I mean, that's an easy excuse to move it to the pile that you're not going to look at any further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I'm on the recruiting committee at my firm, and I'm always looking for the easy way to put somebody in the reject pile, because we have so many resumes that come in. So that's a real good point. Like, just make sure that you are really looking at that attention to detail, and also recognizing that a lot of legal, be it law firms or law departments, legal hiring is a conservative area. So the flowery fonts and things like that, maybe stick with some Times New Roman. Like, nobody's going to hold that against you, right?
Sure.
Can I jump in real quick? So
yeah.
I do want to flag for everyone, if you are interested in working for the federal government application process is incredibly different from the usual practice of submitting a regular resume. You have the option of submitting, of course, like your 2-page resume, but because the federal government has a process via usajobs.gov, there's a resume builder in there that, as someone who sat and had to review some resumes, that is actually the best way, and probably more commonly the preferred way for your resume to be submitted. And the resume, when you submit it, does not have to be limited to 2 pages. In fact, when I got my position, and as well as I've been reviewing others, I've seen resumes 16 pages long. And it's through this resume builder. And I think oftentimes people forget that the government might have like a different process. So just want to flag that in case, if you are a current career government official and want to move on to the next level, I would recommend using Resume Builder and pack it with all your experience. Make the experience sound meaningful though. Use quantitative metrics, show how you made an impact. That's what will help you get noticed, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great point. So from the law firm context, being a transactional lawyer, I put less time in looking at resumes that just say drafted contracts, full stop. I want to see a deal sheet that explains what types of contracts that you've been working on, what types of transactions. So it's more like represented company in the sale of its assets that included operational lines in this industry, or things like that. Put some more meat on it is what I'd like to see, and it sounds like, Jill, you'd like to see that also in the government side as well. Now, for those folks who look at a job opening, and this is a question for everybody, and they see that they hit the requirements for maybe 80% of what's in the job description, should that be a barrier to application?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say so. Sorry. I wouldn't say so. I think like 80%, I'm thinking everyone's applying if they have 80%. I once heard that like it was like a kind of a gender comparison where they say that like males will apply for a job if they have 20% of the stuff on the job description, whereas a female will want 100 to 80%. And I think about that, and I think as people of color, as a Filipino person, I think like we want to have 100%, but know that there are people out there that will be applying for jobs that only have 20% of the experience that's necessary. And so I wouldn't make that a deterrent. And if it's something that you can learn about, and you can like find something comparable in your resume that you can kind of use for that experience that you're missing, I think that's something that's helpful as well. Certainly coming from in law firm practice to in-house, there was a lot of things that they wanted, the experience that they wanted from someone who was maybe coming from another in-house job, and you wouldn't have that experience if you were coming from in-house. So you have to kind of see what it is in your practice that you do that could kind of address that request that they're looking for, but certainly don't make it a deterrent.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. For brand new attorneys, maybe, you want to be a little bit closer to what they're looking for. But I would say for people that have 3 to 5 years or more experience, I mean, again, if you have 20% or even, no percent of the experience, I mean, give it up, because it's easier to learn about law than it is to learn lawyering skills. And I think a lot of times what companies are looking for are people that have they have the lawyering skill. I mean, they've had a chance to develop over a number of years.
Can you unpack that a little bit? What do you mean by lawyering skills?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, in law school, you are taught this concept, IRAC, when you're writing, you know, issue something, I don't even remember, like issue something, conclusion. But there's certainly, there's a way that you need to approach each particular matter so that you have you're trying to understand exactly what all the issues are. You're trying to understand what the client outcomes may be. You're trying to understand sort of, you know, how you're going to need to apply the law in a particular situation. These are things that you have to learn hands-on. They're not gonna, you're not gonna be able to learn them by reading or by just hearing somebody tell you how to do it.
And
So-
John, can I jump in there real
Yeah.
quick? So it's interesting. So I agree with both Mark and Victoria about how if you are 80% qualified or even less, you should still go for the gig. But one a particular a mentor slash coach of mine, he's actually like my boss, my supervisor. I remember I was sharing my IDP, explaining where my career trajectory is going, and without realizing it, I wanted to, well, I was applying for this position elsewhere, but without realizing it, I was listing all the things of why I was not qualified. All the things like, I don't have this, I'm missing that. And he pointed out to me, I have so much more to contribute. And it's really about like fine tuning the language and using that to demonstrate how I am not only capable, I am valuable, and I have the experience that will not only qualify for me in this job, but, you know, I can excel in it. And him as a male like coach for me, he kind of joked, half jokingly, he's like, you know what, if that was me, I wouldn't even hesitate to apply. I would just go forward with it. And it also made me like think about, Victoria, you said like the gender dynamics, that sometimes perhaps I didn't have that kind of that confidence in myself, that self-assurance that I would be willing and able to apply for these higher level positions. But you should never discount yourself. I think that's important. But also just like the lawyering skills. It's also just, you know, like that networking, that personal, being able to communicate well, being able to build relationships well. I think that's so much more valuable. You can always learn the job when you actually get employed, but do you have the potential? Do you have the curiosity? Are you showing that you're interested in going above and beyond and learning more? That's what I would really focus on. That's what most interests me as a hire.
Yeah, that's those are all very valuable skills that I think that it's scary for people to kind of put themselves out there at 20%, especially when many of us came from families where you would get like, you bring your report card with an A- and 5 A's, and they'd say, what is this A-, right? And so it's hard to break through that. Or maybe I'm the outlier. I don't know. But
I was the exception. Parents never looked at my grades, actually.
No, my parents upset. I made the principal's honor roll, but if I didn't make that the following quarter,
yeah.
oh, it's just bad news.
So you know, how did you develop this confidence to be able to go through this? I mean, I know that the mentor told you that you should do this, but you know, sometimes people tell you that and you don't take them at face value. Did you know? How did you develop that confidence in yourself?
That's a great one. I think I'm still developing that confidence in myself. That saying, fake it till you make it, that's real, guys. But I do have, I think it's because I have like a great support system. So I have a great support system out of the office, and I have a strong sponsorship system in the office. So what does that mean? So personally, I have a wonderful husband. He is always pushing me to be not only ambitious, but to not discount what kind of skills I have and bring to the table. And I have a lot of good friends who also remind me. So it's kind of that necessary ego shining that you need, especially when I'm feeling down. My husband, my best friends are available. So professionally, though, the sponsorships, what that means to me is I have people who have witnessed what I can bring to the table, have seen the work products, the quality products that I've developed. And when there are positions or when there are special projects available, they advocate for me. They'll remember me to like, oh, I remember, Jill, she would be the best person for the job because of X, Y, and Z. I've seen her work, I've seen her work product. And it's because of those people who continue not only to invest in me, but also speak on my behalf when I'm not in the room. That's really what's helped me build my confidence. Um, I think also it's it's a daily routine. It's like a daily reminder for myself that I have to affirm what skills I do have, what I can bring to the table, and just you know it's just self growth, and I'm still working on it. But I think I'm a lot better at it than I was 5 years ago when I felt completely inadequate and like totally had zero experience with the government. But yeah.
And one of the things that I think some of our members might struggle with is if they're not, super active in Follow DC or super active in Flow or super active in whichever and Follow affiliate that they are a member of. Maybe there's a fear of reaching out, but I think I'd like to put this out there. I know for Flow, when we've had folks that have really just sent emails, kind of cold call, saying, "Hey, I'm a member of Flow. I'd just like to talk with a senior attorney that could help me work through some of this stuff." We've been very open, so you don't need to wait for a Flow event, or I'm hoping it's the same thing for Follow DC, to be able to do this kind of networking and talk to somebody that's in a safe space to help work through some of this stuff. We're mostly here, we say Flow family, we say Unfollow family, and we mean it. So please feel free to reach out if you don't feel like you have that network and that safe space that that Jill was kind of talking about there. I want to kind of turn back to a more less ethereal question maybe, but Victoria, for you, when do you think is a good time to transition from private practice to in-house counsel?
I mean, I think the best answer would be when the opportunity presents itself, would be the best time. But you don't necessarily. It's not like a sign that comes in, or like it's someone saying like, "Hey, come join us." I think it's when you have made a decision as to like where you want to go in your career. Do you want to be a career associate? Do you want to be a partner? Do you like what it is that you're doing? And then if the answer is no, I guess the best time is like, once you start developing the business roles or the skills that you will need, like once you can like put that on your resume. For instance, I started as I realized I didn't really want to be a partner, and it actually happened as part of wanting to become a partner. Like I started to do this, but like I started to do things more than the cases that I was assigned for my clients. So being available to them when they had employment issues, like just when we were out to lunch, when we were on the phone, how are you doing? What types of things are you working on right now? Those types of conversations, and like trying to gain that experience of like working on employment cases, working on giving them guidance on what you might do in certain situations, like regulatory things. So that had nothing to do with my lawsuits that I was defending. It was like, let me give you some regulatory advice on this, and here's a HIPAA issue that you might not be aware of, and this came up in this case, and start giving that advice so that when it comes to applying for a position in-house, you can say that you did things that a general counsel would do within the organization. So a lot broader than kind of that aspect. But I mean, I know a lot of folks who go from companies like your company, John, and like even your role as in doing mergers and acquisitions. Like my company does tons of mergers and acquisitions, and so like that will like easily translate from moving from in-house or from moving from outside counsel to in-house, but kind of doing things in my role, like you change from being the actual person doing the legal work to the person giving guidance, and so doing more to develop that kind of guiding role would be good.
Great. And then one of our attendees has asked in the Q&A here, what is the advancement potential of in-house? Once you're legal counsel, what is there to move up to?
So I came in as associate general counsel. I think the level below me is associate counsel, and I think every in-house role kind of has different things. I mean, I guess the next position from that is deputy general counsel. At least that's what it is in my company, and then to become general counsel. And so that's where you oversee the whole legal department, and you're pretty much the first person that the CEO goes to whenever there's any kind of legal issue. So that's kind of the role in the legal field, in the legal department. But there's also other things like regulatory, like you can become the chief compliance officer. Those are often attorneys. The chief risk officer is also often an attorney. So you can also go in that direction as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question that we have here from the attendees is, for associates that are looking to move up to counsel or partner, what are the top 3 things that an associate will need to focus on to make sure that they're in the right path for promotion? I guess I'll take this, and everybody else can jump in if they want. With the associates that I'm working with, I want to see a high level of substantive legal skills. And, they might not come in with a high level of substantive legal skills. We have lots of people that come in as a summer associate and then, work their way up to partner. But you want to see that there's some development there. The next thing that you want to see is that that there's this intellectual curiosity and diligence that Mark kind of touched upon. And and those lawyering skills. I was told as a young associate that my job was to come in and make the in-house counsel look very smart for hiring my firm and my partner, because if the in-house counsel looks smart to their peers, then they're going to keep coming back to us, and that also applies for your internal clients, the partners that you're working for. The other thing that I'm looking for is just kind of this general ability to plug into the culture of the firm and add something beyond lawyering. I'm looking at people that are participating in firm committees, that are getting out in the community, that they're really being an ambassador for the firm, both internally and externally. And it's a hard challenge because everybody has their personal lives. Practicing law is hard enough as it is, and then being able to kind of balance it all is it's hard. But I do think that the folks that are able to invest some time in areas beyond just billing hours are going to be able to really stand out. The next question that I have from the attendees here is, would you guys be open to talking to people who are not Filipino if we have questions or want to talk to you guys in general?
Okay. Yes, of course.
Yes,
So
we do that on a
don't-
regular basis.
Yes, we. Very good point.
So don't be afraid. We like to encourage diversity here, and we are allies of others who are not of Filipino background. Okay, the next question is, what can we do if we want to progress in our organization, but we're not finding any traction with support from our supervisors for advancement? That's a real hard one, right? So I would say, first off, how certain are you that you don't have support from your supervisors? In a lot of our organizations, our supervisors are really busy, or they don't think enough to take the time to give you real positive feedback. But that doesn't mean that they don't think that you are progressing on your career, or that they're not otherwise impressed with your skills. So I think that needs to be sussed out first, and I think that's part of the confidence, because I know that when I was a junior attorney, I would turn in these memos or other documents, and there'd be a lot of red on the paper that came back to me, and it would devastate me, right? Because I had this whole academic career of high achievement and not having a lot of constructive feedback come back in the red marks on papers. But I talked to these attorneys afterwards, and some of them thought very highly of my legal skills, and it was just the process of being a junior associate just necessitates a lot of exchanging of drafts and getting things wrong. So that wasn't necessarily a indicator that I wasn't on the right path. But for the rest of the panel here, like, what happens when somebody just isn't getting that traction, and what do you recommend for them?
Internally here, at my company, I think there's a couple different avenues. Like, we have kind of a department that is called learning and development. So if I was in that situation, I might go to the VP of the development organization and see, like, what can I do to move further in my career here at Sound. I might also see if, trying to get support from my supervisor, like trying to get some recognition that way, or other people who might be able to influence my supervisor to see if I can make them more supportive.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. It's really hard because, usually the scenario is going to be very specific. The company, the specific supervisor, like what your goals are. So it's hard to give sort of general advice on what to do. You know, it really, it's gonna depend on sort of so many different factors.
Mm-hmm. So I think it turns back to Jill's comment on political savviness, and then also being able to have an open conversation with an advocate, whether that is a formalized department within your organization, like Victoria talked about, or it could be a external sponsor or coach where you can really have this kind of open conversation and outline some of the facts, and maybe your sponsor or coach knows some of the players and can kind of help you navigate that. But I think the takeaway is don't if there really is a problem, which there might not be, don't be afraid to seek external resources. Don't handle it on your own if you don't have to. Another question that we have about how important is rainmaking. I don't think it's that important for early to mid-level attorneys. The importance of rainmaking for senior associates as they kind of move to partner, I think, is going to be dependent upon the type of firm that you're at. But in a lot of firms, they're really looking more at the potential for rainmaking as opposed to a senior associate that has already developed a huge book of business. There's a lot of perspectives on this. I think that it's something that you should be working on in making advancements towards, but I don't know that it's your singular goal when you're a mid to senior associate. We're at 1 o'clock now. Gage, I want to do a time check here.
Yes, that's right. So we do have just 2 more questions. So maybe if you guys wouldn't mind just kind of wrapping up with those 2 questions, and then, any last minute feedback that you guys might actually have, just kind of wrap everything up. I think that would be a good place for us to start. And if anybody else has any other additional questions, what you could do is also submit your questions for the Q&A. What we'll do is that we'll also circulate it to the entire panel to find out what their feedback is, and then we can go ahead and circulate that response to everybody else who still needs some additional guidance on that. So we can certainly help on that. So, John, it's all yours.
All right. So the next question that I'll talk about here is many firms have 2 levels of partnership, and I see many colleagues make income partner but not reaching equity partner. Besides developing a large book of business, any other suggestions for doing that next jump in the partnership tier? I think that's kind of beyond the scope of this panel. That's a very complicated question that will require a different panel group to work through. Then the last question is, do you have any tips for client development for mid-level associates? My tip is to start with doing things that you like. So if you enjoy working with Enphala or you're an Enphala affiliate, that's business development, right? You're building relations in the community with people who are working at different places. There's some in-house folks. There's people at different law firms that might not have the practice areas that you have. There's people in different geographies that might have matters in your geography that are looking for assistance. So that's real low-hanging fruit, I think, for the attendees that are here participating in the CLE. Another thing is to look at your participation in community activities. Again, doing things you like. If you like the arts, then start working with an arts foundation. If you don't like the arts, don't do it. But look for things that you like, and there are often volunteer opportunities for lawyers and non-lawyers where you can build your network. And if you can start with things that are fun, then it makes it more palatable to do things that are kind of less fun. And then the other thing is do things with a buddy. I will try and pair up with somebody inside of my firm, or sometimes pair up with folks in Flow when I see a community event or a business development event. And again, that just makes it more palatable when you go to the rubber chicken dinners and things like that. But I think those are the kind of basic things that you can do on your own. Within your own law firms, participate with the business development of others. If you hear that somebody is going to pitch a client, ask if you can help on creating those pitch materials. Because if you help on making the slide deck, then you would hopefully also be invited to the pitch, and it kind of builds on from there.
Okay, so I guess at this time, if you guys just want to do just one quick wrap up, your top suggestion for advancement in your organization, I guess we'll do Victoria, Mark, Jill, and then John, and then we'll wrap up from there.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on this panel. I thought it was great. My parting tip is do the thing that you fear the most. I mean, it's scary moving from one level to the other and doing things that you don't know how to do, and that's really how you are going to have professional growth. It's, just if you see something that you don't know how to do, go and figure out how to do it and put yourself in that position. Do not take yourself out of the running for something that that you can do. I think that's the furtherance of our own career, and it's to put ourselves in positions where we don't see people who look like us. I don't see very many AGCs who look like me. There's no one in my company that looks like me in the C-suite, and that's the goal, right? Put yourself there so that people can see you.
Yeah, I would say if you're working in a firm, it's really important to become an expert in one particular area. And if you can, try and make it an area that there's not too many other people doing it in the firm. So for example, here, I'm in the nonprofit practice group, which has 12 attorneys, and we all do nonprofit work. But then even within that nonprofit practice, I do a lot of things related to disciplinary matters for membership associations, and there's nobody else really doing it in our practice group. So a lot of that work is now coming to me, and the partners, they'll ask for my help whenever they have these types of issues. And that's a really great way for you to get exposure, not just their clients, but with them. And then it'll help you also in building your own book of business.
Yeah, and for me, I would say that IDP, I think it's your roadmap to your next career level. If you haven't created your plan or haven't looked at your plan recently, I implore you to do it today. It's important for you to just know where you're going, but also assess what you're doing now that will help you advance to that next level.
Yeah, and my last thing is, again, just have some grit. Realize that if you had something that wasn't a 100% positive experience to yourself, that doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't a 100% positive experience to someone else. And it also doesn't mean that you're foreclosing the opportunity to try again. So try everything twice.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for being on the panel. Thank you so much for all the attendees for joining us for this webinar. We hope to bring you more content just like this on career development and other substantive legal discussions. And so keep an eye out for other DC affiliate series with Flow, with Follow DC. And thank you very much for all the panelists for coming through. I'm Gage Javier from Follow DC President and signing off. Have a great one, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.